Yesterday, House Republicans tried and failed to impeach Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, adding to the already considerable list of high-profile and embarrassing defeats for the Republican Party, and leading Republicans like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz to publicly fume in front of the American people, and it was glorious. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. I'd greatly appreciate it. All right, friends, let the schadenfreude begin. We have several clips to play in this video. Let's jump right to it, specifically the part where Republican Speaker Mike Johnson is forced to gavel in after tallying the votes, a very high-profile defeat, and you can just see the embarrassment and chagrin on his face.
On this vote, the yeas are 214 and the nays are 216. The resolution is not adopted.
You just see, Now he's worried he's about to go the way of Kevin McCarthy. We'll probably end up doing a video on that because there are rumblings that this is the case. Marjorie Taylor Greene, who was very triggered for most of yesterday, as we covered in a video. Again, you can see the chagrin on her face too. She is swarmed by reporters as she leaves the House of Representatives in defeat. This was an impeachment effort that she masterminded, right? It's basically all she's done with respect to legislative proposals since she took office, is try to impeach President Biden or Secretary Mayorkas, and she has failed so far with both. And again, you can see the look on her face. This is how she responded to the press.
Was the Democrats hid one of these votes that they had, so was it something that people would see? Is that something that Republicans?
I'm glad you asked that because well, we can basically look at this as a game, unfortunately, and their strategy. And they hid one of their members, waiting to the last minute, watching to see our votes, trying to throw us off on the numbers that we had versus the numbers they had. So, yeah, that was a strategy at play tonight.
And it succeeded, and you failed spectacularly because, of course, when it comes to, again, actual governance and strategies surrounding governments, Democrats are just objectively superior to Republicans. But yes, she's referring to the fact that there was a hospitalized Democratic congressman who had surgery just a short time ago, and he forced himself to go to the floor of the House of Representatives to scuttle the Republican impeachment effort. But again, it just comes down to basic math. Republicans should have known whether or not they had the numbers before they brought the bill to the floor. Now, we'll address that in just a bit, but some more instances of Republican cope, because it's always fun to see them, just marinate in their incompetence and their stupidity and their failure. It's always fun. It's always good for the American people. Got a couple of clips here of Matt Gaetz. This is what he has to say.
I wondered, wouldn't it have been nice to still have Kevin McCarthy in the House of Representatives? Never thought you'd hear me say that, but Kevin McCarthy, after being dislodged as Speaker, took his marbles and went home. He would have been a reliable vote for impeachment, but if he wasn't Speaker, he wasn't willing to stick around. And I think that the errant expulsion of Santos and the abject selfishness of Kevin McCarthy contributed to this result as much as the 3 Republican members who voted no sincerely.
So again, you have Matt Gaetz here, who led the effort to oust former Republican Speaker Kevin McCarthy. He's furious that Kevin McCarthy decided, well, the hell with this, and resigned from Congress, right? Well, that seems to be an inevitable consequence of you trying to publicly shame and sandbag and kneecap him. I don't mind because, of course, it's a Republican civil war that's better than a Republican Party firing on all cylinders, particularly when it's being led by Donald Trump. But Matt Gaetz is somewhat culpable for this situation because the margin in the Republican Party shrank in large part because of Matt Gaetz' shenaniganry. And as he mentioned, there were Republican no votes against the impeachment effort against Alejandro Mayorkas. You have Mike Gallagher, Ken Buck, Tom McClintock, and Blake Moore, right? And so again, this is the second clip from Matt Gaetz.
Trust me, Blake Moore wants Mayorkas impeached. But I got to tell you, Bowling, as I'm watching that board and it's 215 to 215, I have never missed George Santos more. And what irony that the New York Republicans who drove Santos out of Congress, who are watching the children in their state being driven out of schools so that those schools can become migrant housing centers, that now we don't get to execute on an impeachment trial of Mayorkas because
So again, Matt Gaetz is complaining the fact that the Republican conference voted to expel the incredibly corrupt George Santos. Well, perhaps You all should enlist and recruit members who aren't incredibly corrupt and an anchor around the ankles of those New York Republicans who reside in swing districts very often, right? So have to appeal to a moderate, sane base. Maybe you all should, I don't know, try to appeal on popular, or to voters on popular policies and a popular agenda. That way you could, in theory, expand your majority so that if a George Santos comes along, you could expel him, maintain your principles, and conceivably pass legislation. But of course, Republicans don't do that because they have insanely unpopular ideas, insanely unpopular policies, and a terrible record. So Matt Gaetz is like, guys, why did some of you belatedly adhere to principle and remove this incredibly corrupt, federally indicted, internationally investigated, corrupt George Santos? We needed him for this sham impeachment effort. Embarrassing stuff. Again, Matt Gaetz just complaining about a situation that he helped set up, since he also embodies the corruption in the House Republican Conference. This is a Democratic strategist who puts it very bluntly, summarizing the Republicans' performance yesterday.
Well, first of all, I think there are a few things. One, Speaker Johnson's inept, he's incompetent, and he can't count. And I don't think we have to go back that far in history to see what an effective speaker was, and her name was Nancy Pelosi. He lost more bills in one night than Nancy Pelosi lost in 2 terms. And
again, I mean, that's just brutal. And quite frankly, Democrats and their surrogates should be speaking this way. I mean, they tend to get pretty cruel and callous with respect to Democratic operatives, so there's no reason for us to pull our punches. Mike Johnson is not stupid, but again, his problem is he sucks at governing. He's really good at nonsense culture war issues and, trying to scheme to keep Donald Trump in power after Trump loses a free and fair election. Mike Johnson might be good for that. But when it comes to actually passing legislation and administering one chamber of Congress, again, Republicans are at a colossal disadvantage compared to somebody like Speaker Pelosi, who's just objectively better. She's a better strategist. She's a better whip. She's a better administrator. There's no contest. And that's why I say to people, if you want a functioning government, the rational choice is for you to simply vote Democrat, even if you disagree with certain Democratic policies. They're just better at running governments and running things. This Republican conference couldn't be trusted to run a lemonade stand. The disparity is vast. And they actually spoke with former Speaker Pelosi, MSNBC did, asking her about the situation yesterday. This is what she had to say.
Speaker Emerita, I'm trying to remember if you ever went to the floor not knowing where the votes were.
No, I always say to my colleagues, now the Republicans in the leadership, don't bring a bill to the floor unless you know you have the votes. And in order to know you have the votes, you have to have some in your pocket. They keep talking about Al Green. We were surprised. I was surprised to see Hal Rogers there, my former chairman, in my respect, former chair of the Appropriations Committee. He came. Well, you have to see the apparatus he had on after being in an automobile accident, but they brought him in for that. But for them to say that you have to have your votes. Don't worry about the other side. You have to have your votes. You know what is a majority. If you don't have that, don't bring it to the floor.
Precisely. And with those razor-thin margins, Republicans should have known better, especially, I mean, again, you consider the number of Republicans who reside in swing districts, plus the fact that even if this impeachment effort succeeded, right, the fact of the matter is it's dead on arrival in the Senate. Mayorkas will have his job after a very quick Senate trial where he is acquitted, and then time will move on, and Alejandro Mayorkas will remain the Secretary of Homeland Security. So Jake Sherman of Punchbowl News mentioned, we mentioned one of the Republicans who voted against the impeachment of Alejandro Mayorkas. He points out, not only did Representative Gallagher vote against impeachment, he took to the Wall Street Journal editorial page to say why he did it and how Republicans were wrong for pursuing it. Quote, impeachment would not only fail to resolve Mr. Biden's border crisis, but it would also set a dangerous new precedent that would be used against future administrations because, as we've discussed, they don't have a cognizable basis for impeachment. For impeachment, you need high crimes and misdemeanors, bribery or treason. That's it. Policy disagreements are not a legitimate cognizable basis for impeachment. And if it becomes that, then Democrats could and should, quite frankly, impeach every Republican secretary and cabinet official in perpetuity because there's plenty on which to disagree. And Democrats should be very much signaling, if you pursue this, we'll take a page out of your playbook, Republicans, and we'll go for tit for tat, and you'll never get anything done, and we'll show you that this is not the way to go down this particular path. So Ian Sams of the White House, he's one of the White House spokespeople with respect to Congress. He's taking a lot of glee, as well he should, in the widespread reporting about this embarrassment. So he points out Axios refers to the Mayorkas impeachment failure delivered an especially humiliating blow to Speaker Johnson. That's a direct quote. Fox News describes it as a major blow to the GOP. Wall Street Journal refers to it as an embarrassment for the party. And the Washington Post refers to it as a stunning rebuke of a months-long investigation. Folks, again, just an utter repudiation of what the Republican Party has become because they legitimately cannot govern. I also want to play this clip. This is from a couple of days ago. This is John Neguse, who actually was one of the impeachment managers for Donald Trump's, I think it was his first impeachment, if I remember correctly, over that Ukrainian phone call. He's very, very good. He's very clever. I want you to see what he does in a Rules Committee hearing. This was before the impeachment resolution was brought to the floor of the full House of Representatives for a vote. This was that he's basically having a conversation with the chairman of the Homeland Security Committee, who was responsible for getting the articles of impeachment to the floor of the House. Note the trap here that Neguse springs, and note how stupidly this Republican walks into it.
Chairman Green, I have an editorial here. I'm going to enter it into the record. The title is Americans Are the Victims of the Impeachment Inquiry. It's an opinion piece. The subtext is a lot of bipartisan legislation that enjoys widespread support sits gathering dust while Congress focuses on the impeachment inquiry. I assume you disagree with this?
I do.
You do. It's interesting. These are your words. This is an editorial that you wrote 5 years ago during the debate about the impeachment of former President Trump. It's written by Mark Green, guest columnist in the Tennessean, local newspaper, I take it, in your state.
It is indeed national.
Americans are the victims of the impeachment inquiry. A lot of bipartisan legislation that enjoys widespread support sits gathering dust while Congress focuses on the impeachment inquiry. It's fascinating to me that you've changed your tune. And
Yeah, exactly, because Republican principles are always situational, right? It's perfectly okay to impeach a Democrat, even when conservative legal and constitutional scholars and former secretaries of Homeland Security, even Republican ones, say, listen, you do not have a cognizable case. This is not the way to do it. Please don't do this. It's for no good reason whatsoever, and you're setting up a dangerous precedent, unlike the perfectly legitimate and cognizable bases for impeaching Donald Trump, first for the Ukrainian phone call, and then almost, even more so, the January 6th insurrection, right? So it's a great trap that Neguse sprung. This is a colossal embarrassment for the Republican Party. It's entirely possible that once Steve Scalise, who is a member of the Republican leadership, once he is back from, I think it was chemotherapy for cancer, blood cancer, some sort of treatment, it's entirely possible that they'll attempt to impeach Mayorkas again. But the damage is done. This was their big attempt in the least productive iteration of Congress. Again, thanks exclusively to House Republicans. And this is, they banked so much political capital on this, and then they face planted. They stepped on a rake in front of the American people, and Democrats could and should make them pay for it politically and publicly to drive this home about the stupidity, the dysfunction, the objective governmental inferiority of elected Republicans over elected Democrats. You let me know what you think in the comments.